friends, welcome. Thank you for coming to this presentation. It's great to have a good crowd of people here to see this. My name's Ben Habib. I'm a lecturer in international relations from La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm doing some work at the moment on permaculture as an international social movement. But I'll say something really quick about how I ended up doing permaculture. My academic background is related to North Korea and the political economy of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. So you might ask, what has that got to do with permaculture? Well, many of you will be aware of the experience of Cuba and how Cuba responded to its special period back in the 1990s with permacultural and agroecological interventions, urban agriculture, the organoponicos, and various other strategies. So they responded to a crisis event that was triggered by the collapse of the Soviet Union and the cessation of all the imported oil and other products that propped up their economy. And although they had a very difficult time, Cuba weathered that period much better than did North Korea, which went through the same kind of problems for the same reasons at the same time. But they tried to maintain the kind of repressive government that we're familiar with. They tried to maintain mechanized chemical agriculture at big scale, and without energy, that system collapsed into a famine of 600,000 people. So that comparison for me was a really important reason why I started to see permaculture as a really useful strategy for social design methodology. The other thing that led me to permaculture was I teach environmental politics at La Trobe University, and my students would often ask me, Ben, we know the world is in trouble. We know about the environmental crisis. What can we do about it? And I often did not have a good answer to that question until I discovered permaculture, until I did the PDC, and then I had a positive story to tell them and something that was really empowering for them. So the structure of the session today, I'm only going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to you to do some work and play with the ideas of permaculture as a social movement, do some small group discussion, do some drawings. So I hope you've got a pen or pencils or something. I've got some paper here if you don't have any. And then we'll conclude the session by trying to decode what comes out of your drawings, what comes out of your discussions, and how that relates to the project, and how most importantly, how you are connected as part of this social movement called permaculture. So this is a map of people who've signed up for Permaculture Global through Jeff Lawton's website. It's not terribly representative of everyone who's in the permaculture movement worldwide, but that's not the point. The idea is it gives us a snapshot to demonstrate just how far this movement has evolved from something that started really small scale in Tasmania, in a very uncentral part of Australia, and now spread to hundreds of countries around the world in 40 years. That's an extremely successful spread of a movement by any measure, and to have done so without any assistance at a very grassroots level, that's an amazing success story. What animates me as a researcher, what I'm interested in, and animates me as a practitioner of permaculture, is what does this mean? How does permaculture operate at global scale? So there's a lot of people in permaculture and in the social permaculture space who are absolutely incredible at doing work at all the way from the personal level through to family, community, and even at bioregional scale and national scale. But there is a gap in how permaculture organises itself internationally at global scale. And this is something that we're starting to grapple with, and we've seen with the Permaculture Collab project that you may have seen yesterday, that's been going for a few years now. That project is grappling with how you organise at international scale, and there are different challenges to organising at smaller scales that we're grappling with. So this project is partially inspired by the Collab project, and I've been sort of involved in that project in different ways over the last 3 years. So why does this matter? Understanding how permaculture operates as this global entity. Well, as we've seen, there's loads of international collaboration going on between people in the movement, between countries. There's a need for information and resource sharing. There's a need for translating material into different languages. There's needs to figure out ways to reach people who don't have access to written material or don't have access to the internet. There's gaps which we can cover through drawing on this amazing network that we've developed around the world. And the better we understand how this network operates and how we're connected, the better we can draw on this network to cover these gaps. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to accelerate the spread of this amazing design methodology that we're practicing here with permaculture. This is the kind of design thinking that we need to infiltrate in order to respond to environmental crisis and in order to make our world a better place, the kind of place that embodies the permaculture ethics and principles that we know about. So I'll just speak briefly now about some of the conceptual aspects of the project. This academic project draws on 5 different strands of social movement theory, with the view that if we can draw insights from the perspectives of each of these theories, then it can create a map of how the movement operates at global scale, and give us some insights into what we can do with that information. I'll just briefly go through these theories. The first one is relative deprivation theory. That was something that was developed in the late 19th century. And that relates to the kind of aspirations and grievances that have inspired us to come together as a movement. There's mass society theory. And that relates to what's going on around us that compels us to get together, that compels us to use our design methodology as a means of mobilizing people around common goals. There's resource mobilization theory. And that's about who is in the movement and why we come to the movement. And how we participate and operate within the movement. What are the dynamics? There's political opportunity theory, and that's about the factors that open the window of opportunity for permaculture to spread. So the why here, why now question about the spread of permaculture, which is a really important point. If you're looking to spread the movement, what are the conditions in which that kind of spread can flourish? And there's a set of new social movement theories which relate to how identity shapes how the movement forms and operates and spreads, which is important. So if we look at the methodology of how the research project's going ahead, it's based on interviews that I'm doing. So I'm hoping to interview at least 50 permaculture practitioners from around the world working on different projects. I'm doing semi-structured interviews where I'm getting people to tell their stories based around some guiding questions that relate back to those theories that I discussed before. And I've interviewed about 21 people so far, a number of people here at the IPC as well, and it's been absolutely fascinating to hear people tell their stories and to see how people from different places are connecting to this movement. So it's been a real privilege to be a part of that. It's painting a picture of how the local connects with the global. So even though I'm looking at how this movement operates as an entity at the global level, how that actualizes itself in practice is about what local people are doing and how they're connected. So that's a really important issue. In terms of the outputs of this project, there will be academic publications, and as we've seen in the panel on research and some of the other stuff that people like Rafter Ferguson have been doing, there is a need to establish a more rigorous evidence base for permaculture, not just in the science aspects of permaculture practice, but also in the social science aspects of how permaculture situates itself within the broader social context. Also looking to do popular media, so online media publications, podcasts. I have a blog, so please check it out at some stage. I'll show you a link later. It's also going to inform my teaching into the permaculture design course at Ceres Environment Park in Melbourne. So some of you have been there, and it's a wonderful place. I'd recommend you check it out if you're in Melbourne. But I teach the socio-economic components of that course. And so this material is going to help make that better, and that's material that I really want to share with as many people as possible. So the outputs of this will be open source, and even the peer-reviewed material, I kind of like sending that stuff to people for free and disregarding copyright. So if you want access to that stuff, get in touch. And also this material, I want it to be able to assist practitioners in collaborating with each other. So this material will feed into the CoLab project, hopefully. And anyone who's doing any kind of collaboration internationally, the results of this project will hopefully help you to inform what you're doing. But I have to stress, this project is about building a map of the permaculture movement. It's not about telling people what to do. That's not what this is about at all. So if you feel like this kind of material is something that you could use and draw on, then really happy to discuss and make the information available. How are we going for time? Okay, that's the me talking part over with. What I'd like to ask you to do now is to get into little groups of 3 and do some small group discussion for 15 minutes based around these 3 questions here. Can you see them from the back?
Could you just read them?
Yeah, absolutely. So take turns telling your story with each group member based around these questions. In what ways do you or your organisation connect with other permaculture people around the world? In what ways do you or your organisation feel connected or disconnected from the permaculture movement? Speaking of disconnected.
Nice one. Yeah.
And describe the energy flows and intensity of these connections between you and your organisation and the permaculture movement. And interpret energy flows and intensity in whatever way feels right for you. So this is all about you weighing up and considering how you feel connected to this global movement that we're all a part of. And there's no right or wrong answer now, it's just about your experience in relation to the whole movement. So let's spend 15 minutes having a chat in our groups, and then we'll progress to the next thing. Yeah, just talk about it, take some notes if you feel like it, but this is all about the process.
We can be
This is cool. That doesn't work at university. I just have to yell and scream and make lots of noise. But it's great to work here. Yeah, I know we're really constrained for time, so sorry we had to cut that part of it short. But please, keep discussing these questions later on. I hope they're food for thought for further discussion. All right, let's move on to part 2 now. And unfortunately, there's squiggly pictures there you can't really see, like so. There's always some kind of techno failure. So what I want to ask you to do now is to visualise the stories that you've just told about how you're connected to the global permaculture movement by drawing it in some kind of picture or diagram. I have paper here if you don't have any, so pass that around if you need a piece of paper.
individually?
Or? Yeah, do this individually for yourself. Now, if it's okay, I'd like to keep these afterwards and take photos of them and put them on my blog. So they'll be anonymous, and they probably won't mean anything without the description anyway. But if you're okay with that, that'd be awesome. If not, that's fine too.
I want to be famous.
Yeah, I'm not going to say who's who, so don't put your name on it or anything.
Should we sign it? You already are famous.
If it's brilliant art. But the idea here is to give you something tactile to do in this workshop, so it's not just me talking. And it allows us to consider these questions in a different way using different parts of our brain. And this is a method that I've taken or been allowed to borrow from my PhD student back home, Sarah Houseman, who is working on ecological models of organisations. So she goes in and does workshops with people in NGOs or in government departments and other organisations, and gets them to do this kind of activity about how people feel connected to their working group. I've adapted this to how you feel connected to the global permaculture movement. But the idea is that by playing with this in this way, you might come up with things or insights that you hadn't previously considered. It might bring up some emotional content about how you're feeling about your connection with the movement, or it might just reinforce what you've been talking about. But again, the process of going through considering your connection to the movement is what we're after here. This is about you weighing that up. We don't need drawings that are Picasso-like. It's not about the output, it's about the process of weighing this up. So have a go at that for 15 minutes. And then once you're done, if you could perhaps come and put your drawings on the ground up here, because after that we'll walk around and get everyone to have a look at them and see what insights we can glean from these drawings as a group.
My mum's an artist. I just take some coloured pencils.
Okay, now if you want to just file around, sort of single file, so you can have a look at these as a group. Yeah, great. So as you look at these collection of drawings, see if you can see any patterns in what people are doing. Is there anything there that surprises you? Is there any new insights that you can take away from looking at the collection?
Lots of maps. They're all maps. I think. Yeah. Presentation of
Lots of connecting lines.
yeah.
Got the hub and node pattern there, which is a very good one to include.
Which one's that?
What is
This
it?
one.
Yeah, that's
Symbols.
I like how someone made a legend on their map.
And that center design is really interesting. Don't know what it means.
It
Should be something interesting. Yeah.
that was the Picasso.
Yeah.
Just some people took this over, like you could see where there's literal thinking, linear thinking, and then like non-linear thinking going on.
So what does it mean? What is this telling us?
How unique everyone is.
Yeah, they're definitely there.
How we should work together with our complementary skill sets.
Yeah, connecting.
We're always trying to look for connections and everything.
Yes. Yeah. There's a very clear network pattern here,
Yeah, we
isn't
want
there?
everything to sort of be a center point or decentralized.
Yeah, and wherever we go, like we can take our positive influence to the world and
Yes.
like have other people as well, like kind of with the energy, we spread the energy wherever we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. We all need our sense of connection, sense of community, whether that be like local or global. That's
See, some of them have put actual little human figures in, which I didn't do. That's a bit of a shame.
That's
And
a
then
classroom.
And then this one's nice because
it's
it's
a
got this
classroom.
hug. Yeah. People
And some
hugging
love
each other.
hearts.
And their homes. There's a few homes.
And trees.
Yeah. Some are, I think, like literally of the globe, and some are just of your idea of the movement or what it means to you. Permaculture means.
And I also feel like lots of global maps also represent that there is so much uniqueness in the way we think in different countries, and that is something that we really need to leverage on
Yes.
and kind of to support each other grow better. We need to learn from each other much more.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the maps were from India.
Whoever's this person, they're
A lot
very
of the maps
active.
Yeah.
were from India. All the time.
So you're saying like
all
Coming
the
out.
Indian people
Yeah.
made
centered on
Interesting.
Or because everyone is going back
that
to their
yours?
homes with the ideas
Is
that
that you
we're
in the middle?
taking from here.
Really light.
Oh, that one. Yeah, yeah.
The green one.
Yeah.
It was kind of. It was like made you have to think about, you know, the connections you take for granted. Too. Like we have all these connections that we don't necessarily. You know, it was a good way to remind ourselves that even if we feel like separate or isolated or feel like we're not connected, we are.
Or like sometimes the connections are quite old and not that active. But if someone else needed that connection, I'm like, oh, well, actually, I could tell that person to go and look out for that person because that would be of use to them now.
I also see a lot of love in lots of them. Yeah. It's like a heart at the center and
We're good people.
Well, this could also, you could take this exercise and use it as like an exercise when you're talking, and so when we're talking about social permaculture and PDCs as a way to like, instead of saying what's your connection to the PDC or the permaculture movement, is like what's your connection to the world.
Yeah.
Right. This is just a really great, it's just a great way to get people to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a very replicable exercise in figuring out or considering your connection to something.
Yeah.
Right.
So by all means, take this and run with it.
it's almost like the pros and cons list is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
This is so much nicer.
Yeah.
Do I
No,
really
it's-
want to do this?
This
Draw
one.
about it.
No, I didn't do that. No, that's not me.
No, that's not you.
I'm not sure if it works, but
Yep.
is it possible for me to share?
Yeah, no, it's
what
totally.
I wanted
It's the
to
only one
say
that
through
actually.
that for a minute.
Yeah, cool.
Only a
Absolutely.
couple people actually.
Do you want to hold up the one that you drew?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, there are a few points that I
Yeah.
wanted to
Go.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what I wanted to draw through this was creating an example through social enterprise, which is actually so replicable that people across the world then definitely want to replicate, and then we can partner and kind of scale. Just to give you an example, like say for example how Elon Musk built Tesla, and all the automobile companies of the world went to do electric vehicles right away, right? Like so fast. And that's the power of social enterprise. And that is what we want to do, create such a model of creating wide scale food forests of land that is lying vacant. I've heard like that's a problem across the world. That's not just India, right? So if we can create that sort of a model that works and then work out in this community, we then partner with like other places. That's one. And secondly, what I also wanted to bring up was the permaculture economy. So I think what is also like is a good opportunity when we work together is like for people who want to get into permaculture but think it's impractical, because how do you raise up your kids, how do you get manage your like critical health conditions and stuff. So that's how we connect through this economy. If there are more social enterprises as well in permaculture, then we could probably also connect through that as one of the means. Like I'm not sure if like people get what I'm trying to say, but basically if there are like more permaculture sort of jobs also available, so then we are talking about like more people can easily enter into this thing and we have more connections. Like.
And part of the deal with social permaculture is that you're creating the foundation in the social system and the economic system to make permaculture jobs and making a living from permaculture more viable.
Exactly.
So that system change is really important. It's the foundation of the fair share ethic and the people care ethic. Is that it's not, we need to do more than just do permaculture agriculture. We've got to do system change to make that possible. And,
exactly.
That's an enormous task, but it's the task of the 21st century. This has to be done one way or another, for human survival. And, we're at the point of the spear of this new way of doing things. So that's really exciting. The new isms that are going to shape the next 200 years are happening now, and we're doing it. So
We're at the point of Kali's spear.
Yeah, exactly. So, take that on board as something that's really exciting, and it's a great responsibility that we carry.
Yay.
But we've still got 15 minutes left, so if you want to jump back to your seats, and we'll...
A couple things still.
I don't think it was actually working.
Oh, okay.
It was just hanging out.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually working.
Okay.
That's when I got to knock it. So
That's like that.
yeah.
So one of the things, when you think of permaculture globally, these are the questions of the project, but they're also going to be different depending on where you are. The kind of aspirations and grievances of people in India or Australia or Europe or Africa or the Americas, they're going to be different according to local conditions. But there's likely to be commonalities across those aspirations and grievances that are things that unite everyone. So what do you think are some of those uniting aspirations of the permaculture movement?
Save the environment.
Yes, very much so.
Keep people.
Yep.
The basics of life like health, happiness, spirituality, environment.
Yeah, all of the above.
Reduce inequality.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, new economic paradigm.
Dignity.
New economic paradigm that brings dignity and social justice. Yeah.
Education.
Yes.
Governance.
Governance. Yep.
And a sense of urgency about it all.
Yeah.
Again, in terms of like climate change.
The clock is ticking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The science is telling us we need to hurry up.
And also respect for skills and knowledge that has come before us, because most of this is based on some kind of indigenous technique. So yeah, there's a connection between the old and the new.
Going back to the land.
Yeah.
Or going back to come forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So this is a pretty all-encompassing list. One of the questions I ask in my interviews is, in what ways is permaculture political? So what does that mean to you?
Every way.
Humanity, togetherness.
Yeah.
I think if everyone had these ethics as part of their life, automatically there'd be no war and everything would change. So it's very political.
When I was observing permaculture in Guatemala, permaculture and seed saving was political because it was indigenous people being able to identify as being indigenous because that was their skills, it was their heirloom seeds, and to stand up a little bit prouder given the history of genocide, going, yes, permaculture kind of gives me a bit more, I guess, support from behind, from all of us, because it's a worldwide movement. So yeah, very much the political identity was really strong. It wasn't just gardening, it was the identity.
Yeah.
But it's
When there's a bunch.
you go. I was just going to say, but it's a political which is not aligned with a party, or it's aligned with the ethics.
Yeah.
So it's still very political, but it's aligned as a base of the ethics and the principles that we work with, which is also the uniting factor.
Yeah. Yeah. And if more and more people put these ethics and principles into practice, governments have to respond to that.
Exactly.
So there's a real power in permaculture practice. It's not overtly political. It's not getting out on the streets. It's doing something much more deeper and fundamental than that I argue is more important. And it can be accompanied by activism and alliances with other movements and other things. But permaculture is the core task of restructuring what's underneath, and that's so powerful.
I think the whole idea of permaculture is activism by itself.
Yes.
You don't need to actually. It's abundance. Once there's abundance, no one's going to fight for anything because everything's so local that you don't even need to source something from somewhere else and therefore fight with other countries. But you have everything you need. So that's it.
Bringing out the ethic of fair share a lot more strongly, because it's very easy to understand earth care, people care, but the fair share is, I think, the challenge.
Yeah, and that's a theme that's cut through everything I've seen at this conference, is how can we do fair share better, because
especially against the greed-driven society and the consumerism-driven society.
to control.
Which we are all part.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more relevant to people than putting in an herb spiral or hugelkultur in your backyard, right? It's like fair economy and people being taken care of. And that's maybe how maybe to jump into your next thing, but like using, maybe we need to talk more about permaculture as a social movement than permaculture as a way to garden or a way to grow food, and that's gonna be spreading. That's gonna be much more relevant to people. Like you see the stuff in Puerto Rico, for folks that are from the U.S. or have been watching. Like Puerto Rico is devastated, had this entire, system propped up on electricity and all this stuff. And what happened is a lot of people have come in to fill that vacuum, have created like self-created organizations to feed people, provide healthcare, and create miniature electrical systems. They've set up mesh networks, so there's Wi-Fi in parts of Puerto Rico that don't have running water, but they've created Wi-Fi mesh networks to communicate with the outside world, and a lot of those people are doing permaculture work. And people aren't responding to the permaculture gardening, they're responding to the permaculture people care.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the UK, there's a really interesting food project that's in the UK there's a particular food project around food citizenship. And it's like the actual project is around discussions of citizenship, how to just get people being empowered by changing the language from being a consumer to a citizen, and just making them aware that they can have choices, can have changes, particularly like in what food is available. But as I say, the overarching themes of citizenship, and they're using food as the vehicle to enable these discussions to be had. So I was just sort of thinking, maybe with you, it's sort of like getting, like, what is it that will enable the access, you see, similar with the food. So we talk about the bigger issues, but maybe it's the label of permaculture might be, I don't know if that might not be the optimal.
Yeah, that's something that's come up in the interviews, very much so. Yeah.
I've seen lots of people relate to permaculturists and permies as hippies, sort of.
That's come up a lot too.
I think the idea that you're giving is very relevant. How can we kind of get them easily into this rather than saying like permaculture or shift your life and all that? First we have this food gatherings and stuff, and that might be pretty interesting.
So just a funny little response to that, in Australia, there's a sticker that you could buy. It's been around for about 10 years ago, and the sticker is a question: what if the hippies are right?
But I mean, in response to that, you can say, look at this. The thousands and thousands of people that are part of this movement in diverse places around the world from different life experiences, they can't all be hippies. There's something significant going on here that's much broader than that identity.
Well, when you've got commercial scale Indian farmers doing permaculture,
Why is hippie a negative word anyway?
I guess it associates with citizenship.
That's right. Everything started in the 60s and 70s.
Anything that's alternative to the mainstream is going to get some kind of stupid label.
Liberally, maybe.
Yeah.
They can't really put up with that.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and they'll complain about the same things that we have answers to, and there's plenty of engagement points with people, and that's really exciting. All right, just finally, I wanted to ask if you have any questions about the project or about what we've done here today.
What's the intention for the future of what you're doing, the research that you're doing?
To help people coordinate better, and to help organisations coordinate better internationally, to figure out how this movement actually works at international scale. So that that global zone of social permaculture zoning, that's something I'd like with input and help from lots of other people to figure out how that works and how we can play in that space with the most effectiveness, and do things at a local level that have multifunctional impact across each level of the social permaculture zones. And if you can do that, get maximum bang for your buck, that's what we're here to do. Yeah.
So today in the collab, we're planning to have a work group of media people in permaculture. you could join us, that would be great.
I'd love to.
And then after that, with Romero at 4:30 or whenever the sessions end, we're going to have a continued discussion. So your knowledge and experience would really help us a lot.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to involve.
Media people.
Similar?
Yeah, it's basically this: how to connect media people who are also permaculturists to better engage with each other, so that if there are already existing publications and other kind of things, how can they connect to each other, and individuals, how can they help each other in work, giving each other work opportunities, collaborate, and finally also how to be local reporters through a permaculture lens. So if something's happening in your area, anything political or whatever it is, like a mechanism through which you can feed that news through a permaculture lens, you know?
Yeah.
So it will be nice to form that network of media people. Yeah. Basically writers, bloggers, filmmakers, journalists, any other media professionals who are also in this.
And on that thought, this is a good segue to this. You know, I'm very active on social media. I've got a blog, which I'm going to put the edited audio of this up on there and some pictures, and a big Twitter following. As an academic, I'm in a privileged position where I have access to reach lots of different audiences beyond permaculture. And so I can help be a connector for any of you if you want to reach different audiences. And I'm at your disposal. Like, so if there's any way you think I can help you out, by all means get in touch. That's my contact details, so flick me an email, and I'd be happy to be involved. And also, if you'd like to be an interview participant in this project, please, I'm looking forward to speaking to as many people as possible. So we can either record an interview here at the IPC, or you can get in touch via email and we'll do a written statement, or you can pretend as if I'm interviewing you in person and just respond, record on your phone the audio, and then we can share the audio that way. Or we can have a Skype chat later on or something like that. There's lots of different ways we can have that discussion, and that would be amazing. Or conversely, if you wanted to be the interviewee and go and speak to people in your networks and ask these kinds of questions, and we can crowdsource data for this project, that would be a really awesome thing to do as well. So all of those possibilities, really keen on it. And thank you so much for coming. This has been a great session. So thank you.
You're getting excited a little bit.
Want to get the interviews done by the middle of next year and start writing, but you can keep feeding into this data set forever. Yeah, the more
it's lunch now. Is it?
The more people's stories and testimony you get, the deeper the deeper the understanding is. So, yeah. Thanks so much for being involved.
Oh, it is lunch, and then it's. Where are we? Right here.
Thanks, Ben.
No worries, Jenny. Thanks, Robert.
I was chatting to breaks, so I never actually had a break.
We put some of these in Pip.
Yes, you just didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
One session.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Is
coming.
at 3 o'clock always? Yeah. So after the tea break is collab. So 3 o'clock to 4:30.
Is it because we're
So I still have a chance to respond your questions.
Yeah, sure. When would you like to speak?
When I go back to my country,
Yeah, so we'll do it afterwards. Yeah, it's busy time here. You've got my contact details.
Yeah,
great. Yeah, that would be wonderful. So just get in touch.
I will. I will contact you back.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for coming.
thank you.
It's great to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
So I used to, work more on sustainability, but it was normally projects. Plus strategy, so getting close.
Yeah, go for it. Do you want a card?
Oh, that would be
Yeah.
wonderful.
So yeah, there was I influenced, but I wasn't.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That went really well.
I was really into it.
They might even
Yeah, sure.
really interesting, this social permaculture.
So what was your name?
Praveen, my name is
Praveen,
Hi.
great to meet you. Here, let me give you a card.
I will write you with my details.
Yeah, please do. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. What's HP's? Oh, okay. What do you mean you're not?
Are you connected to that?
Well, sort of through Chris. It's this group that's around.
So Chris with the short cuts hair.
Yeah, I watched his talk actually. Yeah. So it was to try and